Our chief international correspondent Lise Doucette reporting there from Kiev. Well, earlier I spoke to the chief of the World Food Programme, David Beasley, who's in Lviv, and he told me about how Ukraine has always been the breadbasket of the world and now needs food for itself. This is what he had to say.
Well, you've got several million people that are leaving Ukraine, but they're being met at the borders by loved ones, friends, and strangers who are just taking them, giving them food help. But what about the 40 million people that are still in Ukraine? They've got to get food. You've got besieged cities, you've got broken down supply chains. How do you get them bread? How do you get them the food to survive? Otherwise, you'll have 40 million people coming out. And that would be a worst case scenario. So those that are not in harm's way, how do we reach them? So we're setting up, as we speak, supply chain systems to bring in enough food to feed, for example, 2 to 3 million people. And that's not easy in a time of war. But 80% of our operations around the world are in war zones. We know how to do this, but we're scaling up because we don't bring in just food. We also bring in the supply chain systems for WHO, UNICEF, UNHCR, and other NGOs.
How do you get to a place like Mariupol, though, the besieged city? Frankly, because people aren't able to get in or out, and they're starving. There's no electricity, and there's no heating, no food, no water.
So what we do is identify as much as we possibly can, because it's always fluid. It changes by the hour, by the day, and we want to minimize putting our people in harm's way. But we're always looking for avenues to reach the people, whether it's in Mariupol, or whether it's in Kiev, or where it's Kharkiv, wherever it might be. So, for example, in Kiev right now, we've got about 500 metric tons of flour coming into the city, another 3,500 metric tons that will reach thousands upon thousands of people. Bakeries, we're setting up bakeries inside cities so that they can at least bake their food. We'll get the flour on the inside, however and whatever it takes to do that. And again, it changes by the day. But one of the things that's critical is setting up major distribution points all throughout the country of Ukraine, because this is not a small place. It's huge. And so we pre-positioning food, establishing major warehouses as we speak, so that we'll have the food position ready to move it according to the greatest needs, wherever the greatest harm may be for people that are in harm's way.
How challenging is that, given that women and children fleeing, the men are being told they need to stay and fight? So getting people on the ground to assist you, truck drivers, for example, the farmers that are needed, as you say, for the harvest.
Wow, and this is a serious issue, because the soldiers are on the front lines, and they're farmers and truck drivers and offloaders and uploaders for supplies and supply chain systems that normally exist on a commercial day-to-day basis here. So where are they now? They're fighting for their homeland. But we've got to have truck drivers and uploaders and offloaders. We need for the farmers to be back in the field so they can be planting and harvesting. Why? Yeah, it just does not have an impact inside Ukraine. 30% of the world's supply of commodities like corn and wheat comes from Ukraine and Russia. 50% of our operations of food comes from inside Ukraine, and we feed 125 million people any given day, week, or month. We are already seeing price spiking for food, for fuel, shipping costs. In fact, we'll be feeding 4 million people less right now just because of increased costs. Ukraine commodities alone feed 400 million people around the world. So we can't afford for this supply chain system and the farming systems to shut down inside Ukraine. Otherwise, it won't just be Ukrainians that are going to be paying a major price. This is why we've got to stabilize and help the people in Ukraine, because it impacts the entire.
That was David Beasley, the chief of the World Food Programme, speaking to me here in Lviv. Let's speak now.